Hello, Blue Jays fans, and welcome to Sunny Side of the Dome. I'm your host, Karen Soutar, and I'm here to talk some Blue Jays baseball with you for the next half hour or so. And thanks so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Sunny Side of the Dome is brought to you by Jays from the Couch. We stream live on Thursdays at 6 p.m. You can find us on Jays from the Couch's Facebook page, Twitter page, or YouTube channel. And if you're tuning in live and you think of a question or comment, please do send it on in. I love that interaction with the viewers. I think it makes the show that much better. If you can't catch the live version, but you still want to check us out, no problem. When you're ready for us, we're ready for you. The archive version is available on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube, and you can now download and listen to us as a podcast. So love having all those options. And if you like the content here at Sunny Side of the Dome, there's lots more where that came from. There's Jays from the Couch's main podcast, which is Monday evenings, featuring our host, senior editor, founder Shaun Doyle, who's always got lots of interesting stuff up his sleeve. And the other show you should definitely check out is the On Fact Circle, hosted by my crazy Blue Jays, Jays from the Couch colleague, Steve Feck, who is very smart, unique, experienced, funny, and definitely check him out if you haven't been, because he's very interesting, to say the least. So what can I say, Blue Jays fans? The happiest of Thursday evenings. I hope you're all having a great day. I know I am. I can't wait, because our Blue Jays have officially clinched a playoff spot, as anybody who cares about this team already knows. In fact, it happened 1 week ago today, on an off day of all things, that they were that close. They had a magic number of 1, and the Baltimore Orioles lost a game to the Boston Red Sox, and by virtue of that, then they were in. And it took a few days after that for them to clinch home field advantage. Another day or two later, until we knew who our opponent would be, and it is the Seattle Mariners, so the Blue Jays expansion cousins. So hats off to the Mariners, first playoff appearance since, 2001? They had a drought kind of like the Blue Jays did between 1993 and 2015 there. So we can feel their pain. They've had a terrific season. Happy for them, but sorry, as far as we're concerned, that has to come to an end in the next few days there. So can't wait for the games. I'm very, very fortunate to be able to go to some home games, and got a t-shirt there. So yes, it's what we've been working for, what the team has been working for all season, even going back into the off season. They were building. They already had a fantastic core, and they added to it by free agent signings, by a trade, a really good trade for Matt Chapman. And honestly, I think the sky's the limit for this group. But anyway, I'll get to all of that shortly. And excuse me for just a moment. All right, so leading off today, Joel Camaras with SB on the IL and Whit Super Hot is Whit the starting second baseman in the postseason. Thank you for the question. That's a really good question. As a matter of fact, I was on Twitter about a half an hour ago, and Mike Wilner tweeted that he had spoken to Espinal, and Espinal claims that he is 100% healthy now. So I'm assuming by that he will be on the roster, but it's a very good question. Who's your starting second baseman? And with as hot as Whit Merrifield has been, honestly, I don't see how you can bench him. I think he's got to be the starting second baseman for now, at least. He's been doing so many things. I mean, it's not just a home run here and there, which is great, but he has a lot of different ways of beating the opponents, getting a single, laying down a bunt, really smart base running, advancing at all the right times. He's got a baseball IQ that's off the charts. So yeah, great question, and thank you for it. I think if I'm John Schneider, Whit Merrifield is the starting second baseman, and maybe if the Jays have a lead, hopefully they will later in a game, that you can bring in Espinal defensively because his glove is fantastic, as we've seen pretty much the whole time Espinal's been up with the Jays. But anyway, so yes, thank you for the question. So leading off, those of you who watch and follow the show know that normally my leadoff is transactions, comings and goings to the Blue Jays roster and things like that. I thought I would do it a little bit differently today. I mean, we can look back and see the transactions that have happened up until now to finish off the season and to help the Blue Jays get where they've gotten to this point. I think the more relevant point is to look forward because the Blue Jays have to, hopefully not fake news, but we'll see. The Blue Jays have to set their postseason roster. It's actually due by 10 a.m. Eastern time tomorrow. And their first game is later that day at 4 p.m. So, I mean, that gives them enough time, but you do have to have it in ahead of time, which only makes sense. So I wanted to go over a little bit who I think is going to be on the roster, who might be on the bubble, what I think it makes sense for them to do. And of course, everything I'm about to say, yes, Blue Jays postseason roster, that's it. Everything that I'm about to say assumes that all of the players in question are healthy, because if they're not, knock on wood, if there are new injuries that we don't know anything about, then things could obviously change. But so the no-brainers, obviously, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Bo Bichette, Whit Merrifield, who a few weeks ago, maybe some people would have said he's on the bubble as far as even making the roster. And man, has he ever stepped forward. He's become, once again, the player that he used to be a few years ago with the Kansas City Royals. And I mean, has that coincided with, unfortunately, Espinal going on the injured list and Merrifield, out of necessity, getting more playing time? He's just taken the ball and run with it, so to speak. He's just been great. So Matt Chapman, Kevin Biggio, Danny Jansen, Alejandro Kirk, George Springer, Teoscar Hernandez, Raimel Tapia, who's also filled in very well in left field when they've been without Lourdes Gurriel Jr., and Jackie Bradley Jr. Excuse me, if anybody has any questions as far as the back end of that roster, position player wise, so to speak, and if there's an extra outfielder between Jackie Bradley and Bradley Zimmer, to me, I definitely choose Jackie Bradley Jr. And there's a few reasons why. So they're both very, very good defensive outfielders. You see either one playing center field, whether somebody needs a day off or is DHing, or you've got Gurriel on the IL. They've both been brought in defensively later in games when the Blue Jays have a lead. I like Bradley over Zimmer for a few reasons. One, neither of them have great offensive numbers at this point in their career. Bradley's are a little bit better, and he's managed somehow to come up with some key hits here and there. Not as consistently as maybe someone you want for an everyday player on your team, but he still has contributed in various different ways. The other thing that I like about Bradley Jr. is his experience. He's an MLB veteran, lots of playing time. He's been to playoffs in the past with the Boston Red Sox. He was with the team that won the World Series in 2018. And I think having that experience under his belt and on the roster is something that can really help the younger guys, those that haven't been there or haven't been there all that much. I mean, there was 2020, but that almost doesn't count. However, okay, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So that's 11 position players. Mike Moreno be carried as a backup catcher with Kirk DH and Jano catching. Moreno played third base, second base, and left field in the final game of the season. He can back up other positions as well. Yes, some other good points, and thank you. Maybe I should have you on the show with me. Some very good points, some things that I've thought about myself. It's a possibility. I mean, I certainly don't think it would be a bad thing to have Moreno on the roster. Personally, I saw him yesterday. I saw the game in a nothing game. They had him all over the place, and I just he hasn't really played those other positions all that much. And I don't know that I want him out there doing any of that in, basically do or die games in the playoffs where you have to put your best team forward and you have to win. So those are just my thoughts. Maybe they could do it, but I think they want experience out there where they can get it. Anyway, so the way I've got it is two more roster spots for position players. So ideally, if Lourdes Gurriel Jr. and Santiago Espinal are both healthy enough to be on the roster, then those spots are theirs. There's no real debate about that. What if one or both of them are not yet healthy enough to be on the roster? So I'm going to say if Espinal doesn't make it, you've got to have Otto Lopez because you need another fielder out there that can be your backup shortstop. Right now, when healthy, that's Santiago Espinal. And again, if he's not around, that's a position. Otto Lopez, I actually looked it up. And during his minor league career, he's spent the majority of his time at either second base or shortstop. So if he had to fill in, he could. But yeah, I'd love to have Espinal, obviously, if he's well enough to be there. And as far as Gurriel, I mean, you've got Bradley Zimmer, you've got Gabriel Moreno. I really like Gabriel Moreno for his potential for the future. We've seen that he has potential with the bats. We've seen him throw runners out on the bases. And is he somebody who, in his major league career, will end up spending time at those other positions? Well, it'll be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see if he does well enough to do those. And yeah, I mean, I'm so excited about Gabriel Moreno and his future, what he could and hopefully will mean to the Jays going forward. Again, as much as it breaks my heart and I wish they could have like a 28-man roster and include everybody, I just don't really see him as being one of the top guys to do things right now to help the Toronto Blue Jays win in the playoffs. So if you don't have Lourdes Gurriel Jr., I'm probably adding Bradley Zimmer. And yes, I know Bradley Zimmer, he has limited value. He can't hit, not at the major league level. Just I saw some stats. He's basically one of the worst MLB hitters ever to get 100 plate appearances. Bradley Zimmer is who he is. The Blue Jays knew exactly who he is when they went out and got him. He's very speedy. He's a terrific pinch runner if need be, or if you've already got a lead, you can put him in defensively and help maintain that lead. So that's what I've got there on the position player side. On the pitcher side, and I actually wrote about this for Jays from the Couch not that long ago, and we talked about it on the main podcast, so I'm not going to spend a heck of a lot of time reiterating that, just let's kind of go over it briefly. So obviously, your rotation, you've got Manoah, you've got Guzman, you've got Ross Stripling. I definitely have Jose Barrios as the number 4 starter. He's been up and down. We all know that he's had about 2/3 of his starts have been fairly good in spite of getting hit hard. And yes, I hear about that all the time. Bottom line, in about 2/3 of his starts, the run production of the other team has been reasonable, and he's kept the Jays in games, allowed them a chance to win. And the other third of the starts, unfortunately, not so good. And hopefully that's something he sorts out for his future with the Toronto Blue Jays. The bullpen, Jordan Romano, Tim Meza, Jimmy Garcia, Anthony Bass, those guys have been fantastic for pretty much most of the season, other than an occasional blip here and there. Joining them, I've also got Adam Simber and David Phelps, Trevor Richards, who has been inconsistent, but he has put together runs of holding the opponent scoreless, a couple of those at a time. So hopefully we can see the good Trevor Richards and not the bad one. Zach Pop, He's not somebody who strikes out a lot of guys. He's more of a ground ball pitcher. We saw them here the other day field his position very well. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to his future. Definitely think he has a spot on this postseason roster. I'm rounding that out, which might come as a surprise to some people, with Yusei Kikuchi. Kikuchi, since joining the bullpen, he seems to have rounded into form. His last 4 outings, including yesterday, have all been scoreless. His strikeout rate is just silly as a relief pitcher. And yeah, I mean, joining Tim Meza, he would be the only other left-hander there. So use him right, and Yusei Kikuchi can actually be an asset to this team. So that's how I see the playoff roster unfolding, and it'll be very interesting to see what decisions that they make. And in just a moment, I will be going over the heart of the order. Excuse me a moment. All right, so so what's going on with the Blue Jays? Well, all season long, they've been talking about the Blue Jays as a playoff team. In the offseason, it was predicted that they would be a very deep playoff team, and if not the World Series winner, at least go far into October and, well, possibly November, because that's when the World Series would end. We all know that it's been an up and down season for the Toronto Blue Jays. Ultimately, they made the playoffs. That's what they wanted to do. That's goal number one, is making the playoffs. Goal number two is home field advantage in that first series, and they've accomplished those two things. And now the time has come, starting tomorrow, when us fans, we get to sit back and watch our team and see how far that they can go. So how far are they going to go? Well, I have my thoughts. I wish I had a crystal ball, but I think the Blue Jays are poised for a deep run into this year's playoffs. And there's a few reasons why I think that. So, I mean, their overall record, they're the first wild card team, the fourth best record in the American League. And sometimes, in my opinion, when you look at what a team has done, excuse me, over 162 game season, I feel that where a team ends is not necessarily always reflected by their overall record in 162 games. So one thing that I have said very often, going back to 2019, which we all knew was a rebuilding season, we knew they weren't going anywhere near playoffs in 2019, and they did not. They finished with a record of 57 and 95, so not very good at all. But they were a rebuilding team, and we expected it. If you break down what the Blue Jays did in 2019, a lot of that losing actually came in the first half of the season. You look at just the second half of their season, and they were in those games, they were very close to being a 500 team. And that's a huge step up from a team that was, I don't even, like, more than 30 games under 500 for the overall season. So that teams took a step forward even during the season. I think that we can say that about the 2022 Toronto Blue Jays. So under John Schneider, the team had a record of 46 wins and 28 losses. Had that been their record for the entire season, that would have been on pace for 101 wins. That would have been the most for any given season in franchise history. Now, I've got to be honest, and maybe admits that some of what I thought previously wasn't completely on the nose, because I was always a supporter of Charlie Montoyo. I liked him, what I know of him as a person. I liked him as a manager, and I thought that he was a good strategic manager. And when they let him go at first, I really didn't understand it. I didn't really think it was fair, because the Blue Jays have been in a playoff spot for the entire season. Well, actually, when Montoyo was let go, they were in the third wild card spots. And although it's a playoff spot, not really what the team intended going into the season. John Schneider has done much better with this team in the short amount of time that he's been interim manager than Charlie Montoyo did earlier in the season. I think that they've really found another gear, next level, if you will, under John Schneider. I love the kinds of in-game moves that he makes. He doesn't just sit back and wait for things to happen. He makes what he thinks is the best strategic moves with the players he's got available to him. And a lot of the time it works out. Doesn't work out 100% of the time, starting runners and all of that. Sometimes it backfires, but you know what? Nobody bats 1,000, and that's true of managers too. I think John Schneider has done a fantastic job with this team, and a team that right now, the team that they've got, if they had won 101 games, that's in the ballpark, so to speak, with the Houston Astros, who won 106 games, who have the best record in the American League, and who, if all goes well and they win the wild card series, that's who they'll be facing next, the Houston Astros. It's going to be a tough series. Everybody talks about how good a team the Houston Astros are, and they are. I'm not taking them lightly. I think the Toronto Blue Jays, if they play their best baseball, are a team that can go out and beat the Houston Astros and go even further. Excuse me a moment. All right, so other thoughts. So with my Twitter addiction, I was online a while ago and I noticed something that really caught my eye. I don't know if any of you follow, there's a Twitter account called Codify, and it's all kinds of information about Major League Baseball, different players, different teams. I've read some of their posts, and they don't seem to be aligned with, a fan of, or particularly biased toward any particular team. They've just got a lot of information out there, and they like to share it. So a while ago, they posted a scatter plot. So dots all over the place, and it was information about 30 MLB teams. And what they were looking at was combined production from the number 6 and number 7 hitters from any MLB team. On the vertical axis is slugging percentage, on the horizontal was on base percentage. So obviously you want both of those numbers to be as large as possible. Ideally, you want to be top right or as close to it as possible. So I looked at this thing, and the Toronto Blue Jays are top right, and it's not even close. If you haven't seen it, maybe you should take a look at it. Again, the account is Codify, and there they are right in the top right-hand corner. And then there's 28 teams that are kind of in an oval shape like so, and various different points along the graph. Any guess as to who's bottom left? And again, as much as the Jays distance themselves from the pack, there's another team that's distant from the pack in the other way. Did you guess the Anaheim Angels? Because I kind of had a laugh when I saw them down there by themselves. Poor Mike Trout, poor Shohei Ohtani. However, so what is my point in all of this? My point is that the Blue Jays have a very balanced offensive attack. If you follow this team, you know that one of their strengths, probably their biggest strength, is their offense. They're number 2 in all of Major League Baseball in weighted runs created plus as a team at 118. They're second only to the LA Dodgers, who are only slightly ahead of them at 119. What the Blue Jays have that many other teams do not, as I said, is a balanced attack. So you've got with many teams, you know that there's maybe 2 or 3 really good hitters, and if you can contain them, you've got a much better chance of beating that team. With the Toronto Blue Jays, you can't just focus all of your attention on Vladimir Guerrero Jr., on Bo Bichette, even if you want to throw George Springer into that mix, because they have so many other ways that they can beat you. There are so many players on that team who are good hitters, who have had good seasons, And I mean, we've seen games where the top of the order really doesn't do much, and the Blue Jays managed to win because the bottom of the order did their thing, and they produced for the Jays. So I think it's really great. I think the Blue Jays have what it takes to go deep into the playoffs, maybe even win it all if everything goes well. They're not going to have an easy road. Well, one of the other things I say, and it's kind of self-evident, but if you get to the playoffs, the Jays have good offensive options off of their bench too. Absolutely, they do. I didn't mean to suggest that it was just the lineup that they put out there every day. I mean, if you've got Danny Jansen, I mean, he's been hot lately. Alejandro Kirk, he's an all-star, largely because of his bat, although his defense has been quite good too and maybe a bit underappreciated. But if you don't have both of them in the game all of the time, which often they don't because they rotate through that DH spot, then one of them is sitting on the bench. Whit Merrifield, the way he's picked things up lately, if you've got Espinal as your starter, he is an option to pinch hit. So yeah, I mean, they've just got so many offensive weapons on that team, and I think they're going to make good use of them. I think John Schneider will make some really good moves. I really hope they drop the interim off of his title soon. He deserves to be the manager for at least the next few years. He won with his team when he was with them in the minor leagues. He knows the core very well. He knows how to get the best out of them, and I think it's going really well. So excited about these playoffs, to be able to watch the games and hopefully see some magic, hopefully a movie that's better at the end than it is early on. So we'll see about that. Anyway, we're running out of time for this episode. And so that brings me to 3 Blue Jays colored glasses. So I actually have some points to make this week, and I hope that there are people who will take it to heart. So I go on and on. Yes, through Blue Jay colored glasses, I go on and on about not being unduly negative. The MLB season is 162 games. And we know that they've been hot and cold throughout the season. They do really well, and all of a sudden they can't seem to buy a win for stretches of time. And I know it's frustrating, and trust me, nobody anywhere feels it more than I do when the Toronto Blue Jays lose, when they struggle, when it seems like they're finding new ways to lose every game. But personally, I never doubted that they would snap out of it, and snap out of it that they did. So you can feel the way you want. Anybody can. Nobody can tell another human being how to feel, what to think about things. But we can talk, and people can ask people to think about things differently. Basically, anytime somebody is trying to convince another person of a different point of view, that's what you're doing. You're asking somebody to think differently about something than the way that they currently do. Well, this is me asking. There were some of you that I follow or used to follow on social media who have come right out and said during the season, the Toronto Blue Jays are not a playoff team. They're not going to make the playoffs this season. And I'm here to say, number one, obviously you were incorrect, but it was never realistic to make that proclamation in the first place, because the Toronto Blue Jays were in a playoff spot every single day this past season. Now, there's such a thing. Life is not all champagne and roses all of the time. And there is such a thing as being realistically negative. I'll refer back to the 2019 season. Everybody knew that they weren't going to make the playoffs. Is that a positive? No. If you're a sports fan, you want your team to make the playoffs. But we knew that it was a rebuilding season. So to say this is not a playoff year for us, that was realistically negative. I'm not asking people to be unrealistically positive. If I sit here and try to tell you Yusei Kikuchi is winning the Cy Young and Bradley Zimmer is league MVP, that would be unrealistically positive. And you'd probably think that I'd lost my mind and maybe stop tuning in. So I don't want to do that either. What I'm saying is, if you see the negative and you want to let that influence how you think and how you feel, try to be realistic about it. Try to take a step back. Look at the standings, look at the talent on this team, look at some of the things that were going on, and know that they're not going to happen day after day after day. Like the game in Seattle that the Jays probably would have won if Vladimir Guerrero Jr.'s glove had stayed together. Well, that's not going to happen every game. Obviously, it was a fluke. It was a stupid fluke. And hopefully we never see that again. But take a team like the Cleveland Guardians. So as recently as late July, they were not in a playoff spot because the Minnesota Twins were leading that division for much of the season. And then Cleveland just got red hot, overtook them, and now Minnesota's out of the playoffs. Cleveland's in the playoffs. Well, good for Cleveland. Had you been a fan of the Cleveland Guardians to say back in May or June or whatever, this team isn't making the playoffs, given their current situation at the time, that would have been realistic. It changed, and sometimes things change, and that's fine. But coming to that conclusion back then, that would have made sense. It never, ever made any sense to say that the Blue Jays wouldn't make the playoffs this season. And to come to that conclusion, if you're a Blue Jays fan, all you're doing is giving yourself unnecessary frustration and upsets. And that's if you think these things and don't bother to express them. If you tweet about them, talk about them, and anybody else who's a Blue Jays fan hears what you have to say, then you're spreading unnecessary misery when that viewpoint was, again, never realistic. And this is me asking you to do something different in the future. If you're going to continue to be a fan of this team, and when things aren't going well, which they might not be some of the time, take a step back, be realistic in your assessments, and maybe you'll actually enjoy being a fan that much more. I know I would enjoy it a lot more not having to hear that negativity. Trust me when I say I've made good use of unfollow, mute, and block options on Twitter, because there were points when I just couldn't take it anymore. But bottom line, we're in the playoffs. I think our Blue Jays have a really good chance to win, and it's really exciting to see. And I hope there's going to be lots of positive things to talk about. And on that note, that's all I've got for you today. So let's go Blue Jays, and let's watch the playoffs and see how far they can go.